Okay, so how can you solve a quadratic? For our first example, we have to set it equal to 0. So how do I get rid of this 2? Subtract the 2. So let's subtract it. And when you subtract it, you have x squared plus 3x minus 4 equals 0. So in this quadratic, a is 1, b is 3, and c is negative 4. Anytime a is 1, you can do a shortcut. You need to find two numbers that multiply to a times c and add to 3. So don't say it out loud. Just give me a thumbs up if you know my numbers. I'm just curious. Two numbers, they have to multiply to be negative 4 and add to a positive 3. Got a couple of people, got it. 3 people, 4 people, 5 people, 6. All right, who wants to give me those numbers? What's your name again? JJ. You said 4 and negative 1? All right, 4 times negative 1, that does work because 4 times negative 1 is negative 4, and 4 plus negative 1 is 3. So because a is 1, you don't need to make a box or do bottoms up, whichever way you learn how to factor. You can go straight to your parentheses. So in your parentheses, we have the x in front, and then you have a plus 4 and a minus 1. Go ahead, set both of those equal to 0. And solve. So you should get x equals negative 4, which means you have an x-intercept at negative 4, 0. And you should also get x equals 1. So your second x-intercept is at positive 1. All right, take a minute and try to do the second question by yourself. That one is already set equal to 0, so you just need two numbers that multiply to 12 and add to 7. So you should have x plus 4 and x plus 3. Who had that? 4 times 3 is 12, and 4 plus 3 is 7. So your two solutions would be x equals negative 4 and x equals negative 3. Okay, so there's a lot of different ways to factor, and you've probably learned many different ways. Who has learned bottoms up? Okay, so who factors using the box? Okay, so that's the way I'm going to do it. So because A is 2 right here, you have to make a box with this last example, or with this example. The 2x squared would go here, and the negative 3 will go here. You always put the A term top left and C goes bottom right. So A is 2, B is -5, and C is -3. So you need two numbers that multiply to be 2 times -3, which is -6, and add to -5. So I'll give you a second to think about that. So the numbers will be what? What will be your numbers? They multiply to be -6 and add to -5. Not -2. So that's actually really common, that this is usually the first two numbers that people think about. That does add to be -5. I agree. But if you multiply two negatives, you get a +6. Yes, is it Kiev?
6 and -1.
+6. Wait, which one?
Positive, -6 and +1.
-6 and +1. -6 and a +1. If you multiply those two, you get a -6. And when you add them, that's what you were saying. When you add them, you get -5. Okay? So now you put those in the other two squares, and you take out your GCF. Oh, how did I get this -6 right here? All right, it's A times C. So the number on top of the X, go ahead and let's write that out. A times C, whatever your A is, times your C. So A is 2 and C is -3. So 2 times -3 is -6. And then B goes at the bottom. And thank you for asking that question, because I'm sure other people have that question also. So it's always A times C at the top and B is at the bottom. All right, so now we're going to take out our GCF. So the GCF, the greatest common factor that comes out of the top row, both of these terms can be divided by 2, and you can also take out an X. So we're going to take out a 2X. And that will go there. Now, because of this 1, my GCF can only be 1, because 1 is the only number that can go into 1. So I'm going to take out a +1 because it takes out the sign. It has the same sign of the term it touches. So +1. So that means 2x plus 1 is my first factor. Then when I look at my columns, in this first column, my GCF is an X. In the second column, what can I take out of both of these? My greatest common factor. It has to be a -3 because it's touching a -6. So -3 goes here. So 2x plus 1, set that equal to 0. That's your first factor. So your first solution is a fraction. I prefer fractions, okay? So tell me the answer is -1/2. Don't change that to a decimal. So I want you to try to get out of the habit of changing your answers to decimals. If you solve an equation and you get a fraction, give me the fraction as an answer. Fractions generally are more accurate than a decimal. Some fractions you have to round it. They're repeating. So it's no longer accurate. So rule of thumb, give it to me as a fraction. Just -1/2. That's my answer. Done. So x equals -1/2 is my first solution. I'm always going to write my answers as an intercept. No, I will not mark your test wrong if you don't do that. But -1/2, 0 is my first x-intercept. And then when I take the x minus 3, and I set that equal to 0, +3 is my second x-intercept. And that's it. So whenever you see a fraction with a variable, we have to clear this out. And the way you clear out the fraction is by multiplying by your denominator. So your denominator has an x, so we need to clear that out. And we do that by multiplying by x. So every single term is going to be multiplied by x. Put that in the front. So if I take x times 6x, then I would get 6x squared. Bring down your subtraction sign. X times 5 is 5x. But then when I multiply this by x, because it has an x in my denominator, it's just going to clear it out. So you have a 6. So I had to multiply by x to clear out the fraction. And now it's just a regular quadratic. So you're going to set it equal to 0 and factor it. So I'll give you a second to do that. I'm going to give you a second to see if you can factor it. If you get your answers, raise your hand. I'll tell you if you're right. Okay. So we make our box. We need two numbers that multiply to be 6 times -6 is -36. And they add to -5. So I heard -9 and 4. So -9x and 4x. So now we take out our GCF. And if you put these in different boxes, so if you flip these, that's still okay. You could put the -9 in the bottom left. And that's okay. Okay, so in the first row, my GCF is a 3x. In the first column, it's a 2x. And I can check that that's right because 3x times 2x is 6x squared. Yes. So you cannot divide the 6 and 9 by 6. So the GCF is 3. The bottom row, I can divide both of these by 2. And the second column, I can divide both of those by -3. So you should have 2x minus 3, which is going to equal x equals 3 over 2. So one of your answers should be positive. Positive 3 over 2. And then 3x plus 2 equals 0. Subtract 2, divide by 3, x equals -2 over 3. Okay, so this is not a quadratic because it's a power of 4, but we are still going to factor it. Now, looking at your exponents, if you see this pattern where it goes 4, 2, 0, you can still factor that. Now, when I factor it, I need, this is a 1. So when I factor it down, make your 2 parentheses. And now you're putting x squared in front of both. If it was just a quadratic, you would only put x. This is also a test question. So you need to find two numbers that multiply to b. So in this one, your a value essentially is still 1. B is -5 and c is 4. So you need two numbers that multiply to 4 because 1 times 4 is 4 and it adds to -5. So give me a thumbs up if you know my two numbers. They multiply. I got one person. Multiply to be 4. Add to -5. Got a couple of people. Okay. Anybody want to share those numbers? What's your name again? Davin. What's the numbers? -4, -1. -4 times -1 is a +4, and if you add them, you get a -5. So now I want you to put that -1 in one parentheses and the -4 in the other parentheses. Now both of these, because these are x squared, these are both factorable. So you can factor them down again. X squared minus 1 is the difference of squares. That factors down to x plus 1 and x minus 1. And x squared minus 4 is also the difference of squares. What do you think that factors down to? X plus 2, x minus 2. So there are 4 answers that I'm going to be looking for when you take your test. Set all 4 of those equal to 0 and give me my 4 answers. It's a 4th degree, so there are 4 solutions. So your solutions are 1, 2, and -1 and -2. So 4 terms you're going to factor using the grouping method. So what you're doing is when you factor using the grouping method, you put the first 2 in a group. So I'm going to group the first 2, and then I'm going to group the second 2. And I'm taking out the GCF from each group. That's factor by grouping. So if I look only at what I have in that purple group right here, this yellow, what would be the GCF of those 2 terms? Not just x squared. We can divide both of those by x squared. That's the greatest common factor is x squared. So I'm going to take out the x squared. And when you factor, you're dividing. So if I divide both of these by x squared, what do I have left? So if I take out the x squared, yep, I have an x plus 1 left. Now I'm ready to look at the group that I have in the second parentheses. Right here. What do you think I need to take out of that group for me to have x plus 1? What'd you say? A negative 1, exactly. So if I divide or factor out a negative 1 from these two, I'm going to have x plus 1 again. When you factor by grouping, these two, what you have left has to match. So these two have to be the same. So notice how I have an x plus 1 and an x plus 1 and they're the same. That's how I know I did it right. So my factors are going to be x plus 1. That's my first factor. And the second factor is what I took out. So what did I take out? I took out an x squared. And I took out a negative 1. So these are my two factors. Now the x squared minus 1 can factor down again. So this x plus 1 is done. But the x squared minus 1 can factor down to an x plus 1 and an x minus 1. So my factors are, I have two x plus 1s and I have an x minus 1. These are my factors. So to find your solutions, if I set the x plus 1 equal to 0, then that means x equals negative 1 is one of my solutions. And my second solution is x equals positive 1. And we will pick up on that last one tomorrow.